Hi folks, how's it going? You're very welcome to Geography Lesson 2 of the lockdown. So in our previous lesson, we began looking at how governments respond to natural disasters, okay? And this links directly in with things like earthquakes and tsunamis. And we went in our previous lesson, we looked at some of the ways, some of the things that government will do when a natural disaster hits their country. Okay, so to begin this lesson, a small little recap activity. You'll see in front of you guys there, okay, a question. Write down some of the things that people would need after being involved in a natural disaster, okay? So I want you, when you're ready, pause the video. You can look back in your notes to help this and just jot down the few things that people need immediately after being involved in a natural disaster. Okay, so pause the video and spend a minute or so doing that. And when you're ready, hit play and we'll continue on to the lesson. Okay, so if we want to go back to our previous slide, okay, so what are some of the things that people will need straight after a natural disaster? Well, things like water, so important, food, shelter, sanitation, okay. Important one here, if the disaster occurs in winter, so if an earthquake struck Dunshaughlin today, weather's been very cold the last few days, so some kind of shelter is extremely important, okay. So there's some of the needs people have straight after a natural disaster strikes. Okay, so today, guys, we're continuing on with responses to natural disasters. Okay, so we're continuing on with this theme. Okay, so how people responded to the natural disaster. Well, before we go into it, just have a look at some of the pictures here to the right to give us an idea. Okay, so if we look here to the top right, we can see a load of rescue workers and they look like they're searching through the rubble. You can see here there's a person who they've rescued is on a stretcher. Okay, so that's a big response that's so important when it comes to natural disasters is rescue teams, rescue people who are trapped in the rubble. Okay, and sometimes people may be injured, sometimes it may be, unfortunately, it may be bodies that they're taken out from the rubble, but this is extremely important. Remember, in our previous lesson we said people can generally only survive maybe 3 to 5 days without any food or water. Okay, so it's vital that anyone trapped is rescued as soon as possible. So, recovery phase, bodies must be recovered, identified, and buried, as there is a risk to human life through the spread of disease if not. That's an interesting one, guys. So, if a body, for example, is not found, that body will begin to decompose, and that can pose another threat that can cause disease to spread and illness to spread. Okay, which obviously you really do not want. Like if an earthquake has struck your country, the country and the government, they're already tied up and busy enough trying to recover from the earthquake and clean up from the earthquake. The last thing they need, I suppose, is disease from decomposing bodies. Okay, so that's the recovery phase there. All right. If we look down to our next picture here, we can see a counseling session. So someone's receiving some counseling. That's another hugely important thing in the aftermath of disasters. Okay, if think about it, if you've been in a natural disaster, say an earthquake hits Dunshaughlin, and some family members may have been killed, some of your friends may have been killed, your house may be destroyed, your school, your place of work, whatever it may be. It's an extremely difficult time, and it can have a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being. So that's why counselling services are vital. So governments often have counsellors who are at the scene of disasters very quickly to help, I suppose, to help people try and recover from, I suppose, the shock and the stress of what has just happened. So relatives may need counselling support in managing grief after losing loved ones. Okay. As well as people who are caught up in the earthquake or the disaster, these guys here also need counselling. Okay, that's a very tough job they do. They're going through the rubble. They're finding people who are horribly injured, who have horrific injuries. They're finding bodies. They're finding people who are alive. So that has an impact on their mental health and well-being as well. So rescue workers also need support while undertaking difficult work of finding bodies. Okay, so extremely difficult for both parties involved there. Okay, um, how else do people respond to a natural disaster? And we're going to move away from the government response and look at how other countries and other organizations can help. So let's, for example, earthquake strikes Dunshaughlin. Okay, that's the Irish government may not be able to handle the crisis by themselves. So what will happen, other countries such as what we can see here will fly in aid. So our nearest neighbour is Britain. You can be guaranteed that Britain will fly in loads of aid to try and help the Irish people. Okay, you can see here there's loads of bottled water, also medical supplies, food, whatever it may be. And sometimes this can come from other countries. Sometimes it can be organizations like the Red Cross. Okay, so coordination of relief efforts. So there are many organizations around the globe who work to provide aid to regions affected by disasters. Okay, and it's not just organization, guys. Sometimes countries do it as well. So, for example, Britain might help Ireland, or Ireland might help Britain. Okay, generally around the world, especially in like a developing country, when there's been a really bad earthquake or a tsunami, loads of countries get involved and loads of countries send aid, even if they're the far side of the world. Okay, countries do their bit to help out. I suppose their fellow Earth dwellers, I suppose, which is great. Okay, um, another another thing that happens is the coordination, I suppose, of the recovery program. Okay, so you look here, this is in the aftermath of the 2011 Japanese tsunami. We can see the destruction here. Okay, entire towns and villages and cities wiped out by the tsunami. That's a huge undertaking for the Japanese government to try and recover from by themselves. So uh, agencies such as the Japanese Red Cross Society might come in, and what they might do is they might help the recovery process. Okay, so they might help in cleaning up, they might help in rebuilding roads, infrastructure, things like that. Any bit of this is like a more long-term help. Okay, this is short term. So organizations providing food, water, short term. Organizations here like the Japanese Red Cross Society helping with the cleanup and reconstruction is a long-term impact. Okay, so larger organizations such as the Red Cross have systems in place for coordinating efforts to help communities rebuild. So if Dunshaughlin was rebuilding, the Red Cross might come in and they might offer their help and expertise when it comes to rebuilding roads, shops, houses, you name it. Okay. So bit of a recap, guys. So what was the first slide you looked at? Well, the first slide you looked at the recovery phase. Okay. So in this phase, rescue workers are literally searching through the rubble, trying to find survivors and injured people. They're also trying to find bodies because bodies can decompose and spread disease. Okay. What's another phase of recovery? Counseling services. Again, being involved in this has a really negative impact on your mental health and well-being. So it's important that people have counseling there available to them should they need it. Okay. We have other countries and other organizations offering aid. For example, here you've got, I'm not sure what country this is, possibly America. I'm not sure. I don't. Yeah, I think it is America. Actually, we can see an American Air Force helicopter, and these are delivering water to wherever it may be needed. And down here we got other organizations, the Red Cross, for example, who might help and guide communities to rebuild, reconstruct after a natural disaster. Okay, so we've got 3 questions here. Okay, these are to be done for your homework, guys, and I want you to send me on a picture. If Schoolwise isn't working, you can email me a picture. That's fine. Okay. So why must bodies be identified and buried as soon as possible after a natural disaster? Um, Bodies be identified. Okay, that's very important, guys. That bodies are identified. Why my bodies need to be identified? Well, I suppose if you think about it, you know, the person who has passed away should get a proper funeral and a burial ceremony wherever it may be. So that's why bodies need to be identified. Okay, and then there's other two questions here that I think you'll be able to answer very straightforward. Okay, folks, thanks a million for tuning in. Don't forget to check your email on Schoolwise. We will have a live lesson before the end of the week. Thanks very much.